More than 4,000 years ago, people were building cities in deserts, carving tombs into mountains, and creating water systems that still confuse engineers today. And they did it without machines, without electricity, without modern tools. In this video, we're going to explore some of the most fascinating ancient places in the world, from lost port cities to cliff tombs and forgotten capitals. We'll look at how these people lived, how they organised their societies, how they managed water and trade, and why these places were so important in their time. Lothal Dockyard, India. The first great port of the ancient world, on the flat coastal plains of western India in the modern state of Gujarat, lies the quiet remains of a city that once connected South Asia to the wider ancient world. Today, the land looks empty and peaceful, with dry soil, scattered vegetation, and distant villages stretching toward the horizon. There are no ships, no docks, and no signs of international trade, but 4,000 years ago, this place was alive. This was Lothal, and it was one of the most advanced port cities ever built in the ancient world. When visitors first arrive at Lothal, the ruins appear simple: low brick walls, shallow foundations, a large rectangular depression in the ground. Nothing looks dramatic at first, but once you understand what these remains represent, the importance of this place becomes impossible to ignore. Because Lothal was not just a town, it was a maritime gateway, a trading centre, a bridge between civilizations. Lothal belonged to the Indus Valley civilization, one of the earliest and most organised societies in human history. Between 2600 and 1900 BCE, the people of this civilization built planned cities with drainage systems, standardized bricks, and strong administrative control. They valued order, they valued precision, they valued long-term thinking, and Lothal was one of their greatest achievements. The most remarkable structure at the site is its massive dockyard. This brick-lined basin was connected to a tidal channel leading to the Arabian Sea. Ships could enter during high tide and remain safely inside while cargo was loaded and unloaded. This was not accidental. It required knowledge of tides, knowledge of engineering, knowledge of coastal behaviour. The dockyard was carefully built with thick baked bricks that resisted erosion. Sluice gates controlled water flow and prevented silting. Engineers ensured that ships remained protected from storms and flooding. Even by modern standards, this design is impressive. It shows that Indus engineers understood maritime systems thousands of years ago. Next to the dockyard stood large warehouses built on raised platforms. These protected goods from moisture and flooding. Merchants stored cargo here before transporting it inland or overseas. Trade at Lothal was systematic, organised, controlled. Nothing was random. Merchants at Lothal traded beads, pottery, shells, metals, textiles, and gemstones with distant regions. Archaeological finds show links with Mesopotamia, the Persian Gulf, and Central Asia. This was international commerce. Long before the modern world existed, goods moved across oceans, ideas moved with them, cultures interacted. Lothal was part of a global network. Inside the city, daily life followed strict organisation. Streets were laid out in grid patterns. Homes had private wells and bathrooms. Drainage systems removed waste efficiently. Public and private spaces were clearly separated. This level of sanitation was rare. Even many later cities failed to match it. Artisans worked in specialised workshops producing beads, tools and ornaments. Bead making in particular reached extraordinary levels of precision, making Lothal famous throughout the region. Measurement tools found at the site show standardised units of length. Builders and planners followed consistent systems that allowed accurate construction. They were thinking like scientists, like engineers, like administrators. Religion and ritual were also part of life here. Fire altars and ceremonial platforms suggest that people performed rituals for safety, prosperity, and protection at sea. For sailors and merchants, spiritual belief was part of survival. The sea brought wealth, but it also brought danger, storms, floods, uncertainty. Faith helped people face that risk. Life in Lowfall was busy and demanding. Dock workers handled cargo, traders negotiated deals, craftsmen shaped materials, officials recorded transactions, farmers supplied food, sailors prepared vessels. This was a working port, a living system, a centre of movement. For centuries, Lothal prospered, but around 1900 BCE, environmental changes altered river systems. Floods and droughts increased, trade routes weakened, the tidal channel silted up, ships stopped coming. Without maritime access, Lothal lost its purpose. People left, maintenance ended, buildings collapsed, the city faded. For thousands of years, Lothal remained buried under soil and sediment. In the 20th century, archaeologists rediscovered it and revealed its true importance. Their findings transformed understanding of ancient India. They showed that maritime engineering and global trade existed here far earlier than expected. Today, Lothal stands as evidence of early human intelligence, cooperation, and vision. It represents a moment when people learned how to master water, manage systems, and connect distant worlds. Standing near the dry dock today, where water once flowed and ships once gathered, it is hard to imagine the activity that filled this place. But the story is still here. In the bricks, in the channels, in the layout, in the design. Lothal does not rely on monuments or statues. Its power lies in planning, precision, and foresight. Because here, people learned how to turn geography into opportunity and cooperation into civilization, and that lesson still matters today. Katna Palace ruins, Syria, power, wealth, and diplomacy in the Bronze Age at Katna. In the broad plains of western Syria, where trade routes once crossed between the Mediterranean coast and the great river valleys of Mesopotamia, lie the remains of a palace that once stood at the centre of international power. Today, the site appears quiet and exposed, with low stone walls, collapsed rooms, and wide open ground stretching under the sun. There are no towering ruins to announce its importance, and without explanation, it is easy to underestimate what once existed here. This was Katna, and during the Bronze Age, it was one of the most influential cities in the ancient Near East. 4,000 years ago, Katna was not a remote settlement or a minor town. It was a royal capital, a diplomatic hub, and a centre of wealth that connected powerful kingdoms across Syria, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia. Kings ruled from here, ambassadors arrived with gifts, and decisions made inside its palace shaped events far beyond its walls. The Palace of Katna was the heart of this system, not just a residence, but a seat of authority, a place where power was displayed, negotiated, and enforced. When archaeologists began excavating the palace, they quickly realised its scale was far greater than expected. The complex covered several hectares and contained hundreds of rooms arranged around courtyards, corridors, storage areas, and ceremonial halls. Thick walls supported large roofs, and the layout controlled how people moved through space, separating servants, officials, visitors, and royalty. Nothing here was accidental. Every corridor had a purpose. Every doorway controlled access. Every room reflected hierarchy. The palace was designed to impress, but also to manage a complex state. Katna flourished during the Middle Bronze Age, roughly between 1800 and 1600 BCE, at a time when powerful kingdoms competed for control of trade routes and resources. Positioned between the Western Hittite world to the north, the Egyptian sphere to the south, and Mesopotamian states to the east, Katna occupied a strategic crossroads. This made the city rich, and it made it vulnerable. To survive, Katna relied not only on military strength, but on diplomacy, alliances, and careful negotiation. Letters exchanged between Katna and other great powers have been found in archives across the Near East, showing that its kings were treated as equals by rulers of Egypt and Babylon. This was not a minor court, it was part of an international system, and the palace was where that system operated. Inside its walls, envoys were received, treaties were discussed, and gifts were exchanged. Precious objects flowed through the palace, including gold, silver, fine textiles, weapons, and luxury goods. These items were not only signs of wealth, but symbols of political relationships and mutual obligation. Power here was communicated through display, through ceremony, through control of resources. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Katna was a vast underground royal tomb located beneath the palace itself. This tomb complex was sealed and hidden for more than 3,000 years, preserving an extraordinary collection of objects placed with royal burials. Inside were gold jewellery, carved ivories, weapons, ceremonial vessels, and imported goods from distant regions. These items showed the immense wealth of Katna's ruling family and their connections across the ancient world. But the tomb also revealed something deeper. It showed how kings wanted to be remembered. Buried beneath the palace, the rulers of Katna remained physically and symbolically present at the heart of power, even after death. Ancestors were not removed from political life. They remained part of it. Authority continued. Across generations, religion played an important role in this system. Rituals were performed within the palace, linking royal power to divine approval. Offerings were made to gods, believed to protect the city and legitimize the king's rule. Ceremonial spaces within the palace were carefully designed to support these practices. Ruling was not only political, it was sacred, and the palace reflected that belief. Daily life inside Katna's palace would have been complex and highly organized. Officials managed storage rooms filled with grain, oil, wine, and textiles. Scribes recorded transactions on clay tablets. Guards controlled entrances. Servants maintained kitchens and living quarters. Artisans worked on luxury objects destined for diplomatic exchange. This was not a static building, it was a living institution, operating every day, supporting an entire kingdom. The scale of storage facilities within the palace shows how carefully resources were controlled. Large storerooms allowed the king to distribute food and goods during shortages, reinforcing loyalty and stability. Control of surplus meant control of people. Power was practical, not abstract. Architecture reinforced this reality. Thick walls provided security. Narrow entrances limited access. Long corridors slowed movement and increased surveillance. Open courtyards allowed gatherings and ceremonies under the sky, while inner rooms remained private and restricted. The palace was both open and closed, welcoming and guarded, visible and controlled. Katna's power did not last forever. During the 16th century BCE, My Sun Sanctuary ruins, Vietnam. The Sacred Heart of the Cham Kingdom at My Sun Sanctuary, hidden inside a quiet valley in central Vietnam, surrounded by thick forests and low mountain ridges, lies one of Southeast Asia's most important religious sites. From above, it looks peaceful and isolated, almost forgotten by time. Broken brick towers rise through mist, trees grow between ancient walls, birds move through empty courtyards. This is My Sun, and for more than 1,000 years, this place was the spiritual centre of an entire civilization. When people first arrive here, the atmosphere feels different. The valley is enclosed. Sound travels softly. The landscape feels protective. Nothing about this location suggests chance. This valley was chosen carefully. It was meant to be sacred. The builders of My Sun were the Cham people, rulers of a powerful coastal kingdom that existed from about the 2nd century to the 15th century. The Cham were skilled sailors and traders who connected Vietnam to India, China and Southeast Asia through maritime networks. They were not isolated. They were part of a global system, and through this system, ideas travelled, especially religious ideas. The Cham adopted Hindu traditions from India, particularly the worship of Shiva. For their kings, religion and political power were closely connected. A ruler was seen as legitimate only if supported by divine forces. My son was built to protect that connection between king and god, between power and belief. Construction at my son began around the 4th century and continued for over 1,000 years. Each generation added new temples, repaired old ones, and expanded ceremonial areas. This made the sanctuary a living religious centre, not a single monument. More than 70 major structures once stood here, each with symbolic meaning, each with ritual purpose. The temples were arranged according to Hindu cosmology. Central towers represented Mount Meru, the home of the gods. Smaller buildings supported religious activity. The entire valley became a spiritual map. Architecture became belief. Stone became faith. One of the most remarkable features of my son is its brick construction. Unlike many stone temples, these towers were built from specially fired red bricks, placed so precisely that mortar is barely visible. Even today, experts still debate how this was achieved. The technique remains unclear, and that mystery continues. Inside each tower stood sacred objects, especially lingams representing Shiva. Priests performed daily rituals using fire, water, incense, and music. These ceremonies were meant to maintain balance between humans and divine forces. They were not private, they were public. They reinforced royal authority. They shaped social order. Surrounding buildings housed priests, students, and caretakers. Storage rooms held offerings. Paths controlled movement through the complex, guiding worshippers through symbolic spaces. Nothing here was random. Everything followed tradition. Life at my son followed religious schedules. Festivals attracted visitors from across the kingdom. Kings sponsored ceremonies. Musicians performed sacred songs. Craftsmen repaired statues and towers. During major events, the valley was crowded and alive. Smoke rose from altars. Chants echoed through hills. Offerings filled courtyards. It was a centre of devotion. Trade helped support this system. Through sea routes, the Cham imported texts, artistic styles, and luxury materials from India and beyond. These influences shaped sculpture, decoration, and ritual practice. But they were never copied blindly. Local traditions remained strong. Cham culture stayed unique. For centuries, this balance worked. Then politics changed. From the 10th century onward, neighbouring Vietnamese states expanded southward. Wars weakened the Cham kingdom. Territories were lost. Resources declined. Royal authority faded. As power weakened, support for my son decreased. Repairs slowed. Ceremonies became rare. Buildings collapsed. Gradually, the sanctuary declined. By the 15th century, after major military defeats, Cham control collapsed in much of the region. Religious activity at my son largely stopped. The valley was abandoned. Nature returned. Trees grew. Roots cracked bricks. Rain washed away carvings. For hundreds of years the site remained hidden in jungle growth. It was rediscovered in the late 19th century by scholars who were stunned by its scale and complexity. Excavations revealed a major religious centre that few outsiders had known existed. Their work changed Southeast Asian history. It showed that advanced Hindu culture flourished here for over a millennium. During the 20th century, my son suffered new damage during modern wars. Bombing destroyed several temple groups. Some ruins were lost forever. This added another layer to the site's story. Ancient conflict, modern conflict, both recorded in stone. Today, my son is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Conservation teams work to stabilise structures while respecting traditional methods. Preservation is difficult because of humidity, vegetation, and fragile materials. Every repair requires care and patience. Standing in the valley today, surrounded by forest and mist, Bactria Margiana ruins, Central Asia, the lost civilization of the desert at Bactria Margiana, archaeological complex, natural human narration style, optimized for approximately 25 minutes, long, continuous flow, no short breaks. In the vast deserts of Central Asia, where endless plains stretch beneath burning sunlight and dry winds move across empty land, there are ruins that most people have never heard of, yet they once belonged to one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. Today, this region looks silent and lifeless, with sand dunes, dry riverbeds, and scattered shrubs covering the landscape. There are no major cities nearby, no busy highways, and very few visitors. It feels like a place where nothing important could ever have existed. But thousands of years ago, this desert was full of life. This was the land of the Bactria Margiana civilization, also known as the Oxus civilization, one of the great forgotten cultures of the Bronze Age, between roughly 2300 and 1700 BCE, long before the rise of classical empires. People here built large cities, complex palaces, temples, and irrigation systems that supported tens of thousands of inhabitants. They created a powerful society in what is now modern-day Turkmenistan, northern Afghanistan, and surrounding regions, turning dry land into productive territory through planning, engineering, and cooperation. This was not a primitive settlement, it was an organized civilization, with structure, with hierarchy, with vision. The heart of this civilization lay in the Murghab River Delta, where seasonal waters once spread across wide plains before disappearing into the desert. These waters allowed farmers to grow crops, raise animals, and support permanent communities. Over time, people learned how to control and distribute this water through canals and reservoirs, creating artificial oases in an otherwise hostile environment. Without water, nothing here could exist. With water, everything became possible. This understanding shaped the entire society. One of the most important sites of this civilization is Gonur Tepe, a massive ancient city that served as a political, religious, and administrative centre. Excavations have revealed enormous fortified walls, palace complexes, ceremonial spaces, residential districts, and storage facilities, all arranged in a carefully planned layout. Gonur Tepe was not built randomly. It followed a design, it followed rules, it followed authority. At the centre of the city stood a large palace temple complex surrounded by thick defensive walls. Inside were halls, courtyards, altars, and private rooms that were used by rulers, priests, and administrators. This was where decisions were made, rituals were performed, and power was displayed. Architecture here was a tool for control, a tool for organisation, a tool for identity. Surrounding the central complex were neighbourhoods where ordinary people lived and worked. Houses were built from mud bricks and arranged along streets and open spaces. Workshops produced pottery, metal tools, seals, and ornaments. Storage rooms held grain and goods collected through taxation and trade. This was a functioning city, not a ceremonial shell, not a seasonal camp, a permanent centre of life. Trade played a major role in the success of the Bactria Margiana civilization. Archaeological finds show connections with Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Iran, and the steppes of Central Asia. Goods such as lapis lazuli, tin, copper, textiles, and luxury items moved through this region, linking distant cultures together. This was part of an early global network, long before modern globalization. The people of this civilization were skilled craftsmen. They produced finely decorated pottery, intricate metal objects, seals with symbolic designs, and jewellery made from precious stones. These items show high levels of technical knowledge and artistic tradition. They were not copying others. They were creating their own style. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Bactria Margiana culture is its religious system. Excavations have revealed fire altars, ritual platforms, and sacred spaces where ceremonies were performed. Some scholars believe that early forms of Indo-Iranian religious traditions developed here, possibly influencing later Zoroastrian beliefs. Fire, it was embedded in it. Burial practices also reveal much about social structure. Rich graves contained weapons, jewellery, vessels, and imported goods, while simpler burials held fewer items. This shows that society was divided into classes, with elites enjoying greater wealth and authority. Leadership was real. Hierarchy existed. Power was concentrated. Life in these desert cities required discipline and cooperation. Farmers depended on irrigation systems that had to be maintained constantly. If canals failed, crops failed. If crops failed, the city suffered. This meant that people had to work together under centralized control. For several centuries, this system worked remarkably well. Cities expanded, trade increased, culture flourished. The desert was held back by human intelligence and organization. But stability in such an environment is fragile. Around 1700 BCE, conditions began to change. River courses shifted, climate patterns altered, water supplies became unreliable, agricultural production declined. At the same time, new groups migrated into the region from the steppes and surrounding areas, bringing different lifestyles and pressures. Healy Archaeological Park. Tombs. UAE life and death in Arabia's early civilization at Hilly Archaeological Park. Natural human narration style, optimized for approximately 20 minutes, long, continuous flow, no short breaks. In the desert region of eastern Arabia, near the modern city of Al Ain, lies an archaeological site that quietly reveals how some of the earliest communities in this harsh landscape learned to survive, organize, and build lasting societies. Today, the area looks peaceful and carefully maintained, with green gardens, walking paths, and shaded spaces for visitors. It feels calm, modern, and controlled, but beneath this surface lies a history that reaches back more than 4,000 years. This is Hilly Archaeological Park, and long before modern cities existed in the Gulf region, this place was already a centre of human life. When visitors first enter the park, the most striking features are the large circular stone tombs rising from the ground. These structures are simple in appearance, made from carefully stacked stones arranged in wide rings. They do not look dramatic, they do not rise high into the sky, but they carry enormous meaning, because these tombs represent one of the earliest organised burial traditions in Arabia. They show that the people who lived here were not temporary desert wanderers. They were settled. The main tombs at Hilly date back to the Bronze Age, around 2500 BCE, during a period known as the an-Nar culture. At this time, communities across what is now the United Arab Emirates and Oman were developing permanent settlements supported by farming, herding, and regional trade. This was a turning point in Arabian history. People were no longer only following seasonal routes. Hilly was located near natural groundwater sources that allowed agriculture to exist in an otherwise dry environment. Date palms, grains, and vegetables could be grown here, supported by early irrigation techniques and careful water management. These resources made long-term settlement possible. Without water, nothing could survive. With water, civilization could grow. This simple truth shaped everything about life at Hilly. The large circular tombs, often called collective tombs, were built to hold the remains of many individuals from the same community or family group. Inside, archaeologists have found bones from dozens of people, along with pottery, jewellery, weapons, and tools. These were not simple graves. By burying their dead together in permanent stone structures, the people of Healy were making a powerful statement. They were saying that their community would endure, that their ancestors mattered. That memory was important. Death was not separation, it was connection between past and present, between generations. The most famous structure at the site is the Hilly Grand Tomb, a massive circular monument more than 12 metres in diameter. It was built using carefully shaped limestone blocks fitted together with remarkable precision. Decorative carvings of animals and human figures once adorned parts of its surface, showing that these tombs also had artistic and symbolic meaning. This was not rushed construction. It required planning. It required skilled labour. It required leadership. Building such a monument in a desert environment meant organising workers, transporting stone, and coordinating resources over long periods of time. This suggests that Hilly had strong social systems and recognised authority. Someone was in charge, someone organised, someone planned. Around the tombs, archaeologists have uncovered remains of houses, workshops, storage areas and agricultural spaces. These discoveries show that Hilly was not only a burial site, it was a living settlement where people farmed, crafted tools, raised animals and managed daily life. Homes were built from mud, brick and stone, designed to provide protection from heat and sand. Storage rooms held grain and supplies. Fireplaces and cooking areas show how families prepared food and gathered together. This was a working community, not a temporary camp, not a seasonal stop, a permanent home. Trade played a major role in Hilly's development. During the Bronze Age, communities in this region were connected to trade networks stretching across Mesopotamia, Iran, the Indus Valley, and the Arabian Sea. Copper, pottery, beads, shells, and luxury items moved along these routes. Archaeological finds at Hilly include objects made from materials that originated hundreds of kilometres away. This shows that local people were part of a much larger economic system. They were not isolated, they were connected, and they understood the value of exchange. Copper production was especially important in this period. Nearby mountain regions contained copper deposits that were mined and processed for export. Hilly and similar settlements benefited from this industry, supplying materials to powerful civilizations. Farther north, this created wealth, it created influence, it created opportunity. Religion and belief were closely tied to burial practices at Hilly. The careful placement of bodies, the inclusion of grave goods, and the construction of monumental tombs all suggest that people believed in an afterlife or continued spiritual existence. Ancestors were respected, they were remembered, they were honoured. Rituals likely accompanied burials, involving ceremonies, offerings, and communal gatherings. These events reinforced social bonds and strengthened group identity. In difficult environments, unity matters. Shared belief helps people survive. Shared memory builds stability. Life in Bronze Age Hilly was demanding. Summers were extremely hot. Rainfall was limited. Crops could fail. Water supplies could weaken. Arasas ruins. Jordan. Faith, trade, and survival in the desert at Arasas. In the wide desert plateau of central Jordan, where dry winds move across open land and the horizon feels endlessly distant, lies the quiet remains of a city that once connected empires, religions, and cultures. From far away, the site looks simple and almost forgotten. Low stone walls rise from dusty ground. Broken columns lie scattered. Empty streets stretch between ruined buildings. This is Rasas, and for more than 1,000 years this place stood at the crossroads of trade, faith, and survival. When visitors first arrive, the ruins do not feel dramatic. There are no towering palaces or massive monuments. Instead, there are foundations of houses, churches, defensive walls, and public buildings spread across a flat landscape. Everything feels open and exposed, but this simplicity hides a long and complex history. Arrasas began as a Roman military camp, built to guard important routes across the desert. During the Roman period, controlling movement meant controlling power. Caravans carrying spices, metals, textiles, and food crossed this region on their way between Arabia, the Mediterranean, and Mesopotamia. This site helped protect those routes and profit from them. Over time, the military camp developed into a permanent settlement. Soldiers were joined by merchants, craftsmen, farmers, and families. Houses were built, markets appeared, storage buildings were constructed. Life slowly took root in the desert. Water made this possible. Nearby wells and cisterns allowed people to collect and store rainwater. Channels directed it to homes and fields. Without these systems, no settlement could survive here. Everything depended on careful management. During the Byzantine period, from about the 4th to the 7th century, Rasas entered its most important phase. Christianity spread across the region, and the city became a major religious centre. Dozens of churches were built, each decorated with detailed stonework and colourful mosaics. These churches were not small. They were community centres, places of worship, places of gathering, places of identity. The most famous of these is the Church of St. Stephen, which contains one of the largest and most detailed mosaic floors in the Middle East. The mosaic shows cities, rivers, animals, and landscapes from across the region, including Jerusalem, Madaba, Gaza, and Alexandria. This artwork was not decoration alone. It was knowledge. It was memory. It was a map of the world as people understood it. Through these images, worshippers were reminded that they were part of something larger than their local community. They belonged to a wide spiritual and cultural network stretching across the eastern Mediterranean. Religion shaped daily life here. Priests organised rituals. Festivals followed the calendar. Pilgrims visited sacred sites. Charity supported the poor. Education was linked to faith. Belief gave structure. Belief gave stability. Belief gave meaning. At the same time, trade continued to support the city. Caravans still passed through. Agricultural products from nearby valleys were exchanged for imported goods. Workshops produced pottery, tools, and textiles. Storage rooms held grain and oil. Rasas balanced religion and economy, faith and work, prayer and trade. This balance kept it alive. One of the most unusual features of the site is a tall stone tower built near the settlement. This tower was likely used by ascetic monks who chose to live in isolation and prayer, standing on high platforms for years at a time. This shows how deeply spiritual life had become. Some people withdrew from society, others supported them. Both were part of the same system. Life in Rasas was demanding. Summers were extremely hot, rain was limited, travel was difficult, political control shifted between empires, taxes changed, armies passed through. Stability was never guaranteed, yet the city survived for centuries because people adapted. They repaired walls, they rebuilt churches, they maintained water systems, they adjusted trade routes, they cooperated. From the 7th century onward, Islamic rule spread across the region. Rasas continued to exist under new administration. Many Christian communities remained, and religious life continued alongside new traditions. This period shows continuity rather than sudden collapse. Cultures overlapped, beliefs coexisted, life went on, but over time, trade routes shifted, new cities became more important, political centres moved, water systems weakened, maintenance declined. Gradually, the city lost its role. Families left, markets closed, churches fell silent, buildings collapsed. By the medieval period, Rasas was largely abandoned. Sand and dust covered streets, stones were reused elsewhere, memory faded. For centuries the ruins remained quiet, known mainly to local communities. Modern archaeology in the 20th century revealed the true importance of the site, uncovering churches, mosaics, inscriptions, and houses that told the story of a multicultural desert city. What researchers found changed understanding of Jordan's history. It showed that this region was not empty or marginal. It was active, connected, influential. Today, Rasas is protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Bam, Citadel, Iran. The earth and time in mud brick at Bam Citadel. In the arid landscape of southeastern Iran, where desert plain meets distant hills and the sun blazes across an open sky, there stands a ruin unlike most others on earth. Not cut from stone, not carved from marble, but shaped entirely from mud and earth. Stretching across a vast plateau near the modern town of Bam, this place was once one of the greatest fortified cities in the ancient world, now remembered as one of the most remarkable examples of human adaptation and endurance. This is the Bam Citadel. Long before it became a symbol of survival, this site was a centre of settlement, trade, defence, and culture that endured for more than 2,000 years. Its origins can be traced back to at least the time of the Achaemenid Empire, sometime between the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, when early fortifications were built here to guard routes across the desert and provide shelter for travellers and merchants, moving goods east and west. In a landscape where rain is rare and temperatures swing dramatically between blistering heat and cold nights, the builders of Bam chose to construct every building using adobe, sun-dried clay bricks mixed with straw and shaped by hand. These bricks were not just material, they were a record of generations of accumulated knowledge about how to live with limited resources, how to shape the earth into shelter, and how to make architecture that could endure centuries of desert winds, seasonal rains, and the slow turning of time. From above, the citadel appears like a gargantuan sandcastle frozen in place, its walls and towers extending across nearly 200,000 square metres, once crowned by more than 30 watchtowers, and surrounded by a wide moat that emphasised its defensive purpose. Inside these walls lay a complex city, not just a fortress, with divided quarters for rulers, soldiers, artisans, merchants and common families. There were bazaars where goods were traded, homes where families lived, baths where people gathered, caravanserais for travellers, religious spaces, and open courtyards where daily life mixed and continued through the seasons. What made Bam extraordinary was not only its size, but the way it was woven into the natural environment and historic trade networks. Positioned near the Silk Road, the ancient network of trade routes linking the Middle East to Central Asia, South Asia, and beyond, Bam became a crossroads where East met West, where merchants travelled with silk, cotton, spices, metals, and ideas, and where cultures intersected and influenced one another. Over time, Bam became known not only for its strategic position, but also for its production of fine garments such as silk and cotton textiles that were traded across vast distances. Inside the citadel's walls, everyday life was both ordinary and remarkable. People worked with the same mud that built their city, mixing it with water from qanat systems, traditional underground canals that brought water from distant mountains into the desert to irrigate date groves, farms, and household gardens that made life here sustainable. These qanats were not just engineering feats, they were lifelines, woven beneath the ground, carrying precious water like blood coursing through the body of the city. Families lived in adobe homes built to keep out heat and sand, with narrow streets that shaded the ground during the worst of the sun, and wind towers that channeled cool breezes into living spaces. Children grew up knowing the smell of baked earth, the taste of dates harvested under the sun, and the sound of merchants calling out prices in the market square. Scholars and poets may have walked these same streets. Soldiers stood guard at the gates. Travellers paused here, resting before continuing journeys across deserts, mountains, and rivers. This was life for centuries. The citadel endured through multiple eras: Persian, Parthian, Sassanid, medieval Islamic, each leaving its mark, renovating walls, reinforcing towers, and shaping buildings to reflect the needs, aesthetics, and technology of its time. The city was inhabited continuously until the early 20th century, when new settlements began to grow outside the old walls. By 1932, the citadel's internal quarters were largely abandoned, and life in Bam shifted to more modern neighbourhoods beyond its protective earthworks. Then, in late December of 2003, a devastating earthquake struck this historic land. A powerful tremor claimed thousands of lives in the surrounding city and left much of the citadel crumbled like the sandcastle it resembled. Its towers reduced to fragments, its great walls partly collapsed, and its ancient buildings shattered. What had stood for 2 millennia was suddenly broken in moments. But that was not the end of Bam's story. The destruction revealed as much as it erased. As the ruins lay exposed, archaeologists gained access to layers of construction that had been hidden for centuries, uncovering details of earlier phases of planning and building that offered new insight into how this remarkable adobe city came into being. For researchers, the earthquake became an unexpected excavation, showing not only what had been lost, but what might be learned about ancient methods of construction, adaptation, and environmental resilience. In the years since, international efforts have supported reconstruction and preservation of Bam, recognizing that this site is not just an archaeological curiosity, but a living teacher of ancient engineering, architecture, and social organization. UNESCO inscribed Bam and its surrounding cultural landscape as a World Heritage Site, emphasizing its outstanding value as a desert city that survived, and in many ways still survives. Susa ruins, Iran. The city that refused to disappear at Susa, in the dry plains of southwestern Iran, where the land stretches wide under open skies and rivers once carried life across empty ground, lie the remains of one of the oldest cities in human history. At first glance the site looks simple. Low mounds of earth rise gently from the desert. Broken bricks and scattered stones lie across open fields. There are no massive towers, no standing palaces, no dramatic monuments. And yet, beneath this quiet surface lies more than 6,000 years of human life. This is Susa, and few places on earth have seen as much history as this one. Long before great empires existed, long before written records became common, people were already settling here. They were drawn by water, fertile soil, and natural routes connecting mountains, plains, and distant lands. Small farming communities slowly grew into permanent neighbourhoods. Houses became larger, storage areas appeared, trade expanded. Step by step, a village became a city, and that city never truly disappeared. Susa was built in a region where survival depended on understanding the environment. Summers were hot, rain was limited, floods could be destructive, farmers had to manage water carefully, builders had to choose strong materials, leaders had to organise labour. From the beginning, life here required planning and cooperation. As centuries passed, Susa became the heart of the Elamite civilization, one of the earliest major cultures of the ancient Middle East. The Elamites developed their own language, religion, and political system, separate from their neighbours in Mesopotamia. From Susa, their rulers controlled trade, territory, and diplomacy. This was not a minor city, it was a capital, a centre of authority, a place where decisions shaped entire regions. Temples rose, palaces were built, fortifications protected key areas, craftsmen produced pottery, metal tools, seals and ornaments. Scribes recorded transactions and agreements. Priests organised rituals that linked political power to divine approval. Power here was not only military, it was administrative, religious, cultural. Susa became a meeting point between civilizations. Merchants arrived from river valleys to the west, mountain regions to the north, and deserts to the south. Goods moved through markets, ideas moved with travellers, artistic styles blended, technologies spread. The city became a bridge between worlds. Later, when the Persian Empire rose under rulers like Darius and his successors, Susa gained even greater importance. It became one of the main royal capitals of the empire. Kings built grand palaces here, using stone, glazed bricks, and carved reliefs to display wealth and authority. These buildings were meant to impress, to intimidate, to communicate power. From Susa, messages were sent across vast territories. Officials managed provinces, taxes were collected, armies were supplied, diplomats were received. This was imperial administration in action. Inside the city, daily life continued beneath this political structure. Families lived in mud brick homes, children learned trades, farmers worked surrounding fields, artisans shaped materials, traders negotiated prices, religious festivals marked seasons. A normal city, inside an extraordinary system. What makes Susa unique is not just its power, but its continuity. While many ancient cities were destroyed and abandoned forever, Susa kept adapting. When one empire fell, another took its place. When buildings collapsed, new ones rose on top. When beliefs changed, rituals evolved. Layers built upon layers, century after century. Assyrian armies attacked and burned parts of the city. Later, Greek rulers arrived after Alexander's campaigns. Parthian and then Islamic administrations followed. Each era left traces. Each reshaped the landscape, but none erased it. Susa always returned, walking through the ruins. Today, you are not standing in one time period. You are standing in many. Beneath your feet lie stacked foundations from different civilizations. A palace from one era rests on a temple from another. A street from one period crosses houses from another. History here is vertical, not horizontal. One of the most powerful features of the site is its earth mounds, formed by thousands of years of collapsed buildings, debris, and rebuilding. These hills are not natural, they are made of human activity. Every layer represents lives, homes, work, conflict, celebration, loss, life. Archaeologists digging here do not uncover a single story. They uncover hundreds, each resting on top of the other. For ordinary people, life in Susa was often uncertain. Floods could destroy crops. Wars could disrupt trade. Tadrat Rouge, rock art, Sahara messages from a green desert at Tadrat Rouge, natural human narration style, approximately 25 minutes, long, continuous flow. In the deep southeastern corner of Algeria, far from modern cities and busy roads, lies a region of sandstone mountains, narrow canyons, and wind-shaped cliffs that feels completely detached from the modern world. The landscape is harsh, dry, and silent, with endless stretches of sand broken only by red and orange rock formations rising from the desert floor. This is Tadrat Rouge, and hidden within these rocks is one of the greatest visual records of early human life ever created. At first, the area looks empty. There are no villages, no farms, No permanent water sources. Nothing suggests that people could have lived here for long periods of time. The heat is intense, rain is rare, vegetation is scarce. But when you begin to explore the canyons and rock shelters, another story appears. On shaded walls and protected surfaces, thousands of ancient paintings and carvings cover the stone. Animals, people, hunting scenes, rituals, daily life, dreams, memories. These images were created over thousands of years by different groups of people who once called this region home. And their art tells us something extraordinary. This desert was not always a desert. More than 8,000 years ago, during a period known as the African humid phase, the Sahara looked completely different. Rain fell regularly, rivers flowed, lakes formed, grasslands spread across areas that are now covered by sand. This was a green Sahara, a living landscape, full of animals and people. Elephants, giraffes, cattle, antelope, and hippos once moved through this region. Herds grazed on open plains. Hunters followed migration routes. Families settled near water sources. Tadrat Rouge was part of this world, a place where people lived, travelled and gathered. The rock art found here dates from roughly 8000 BCE to 1000 BCE, covering several major phases of human history. Each period reflects changes in climate, lifestyle, technology and belief. The earliest images show wild animals and hunters armed with simple tools. These paintings suggest that people lived mainly by hunting and gathering, following herds and seasonal patterns. Later, images of cattle begin to appear, large herds, carefully drawn, often surrounded by people. This marks a major shift. Traditions became stronger and art became more detailed. Some paintings show people dancing, celebrating, or participating in ceremonies. Others show family groups, daily activities, and social interactions. These are not random drawings. They are records of identity. They show how people saw themselves, how they understood their world, how they remembered their lives. One of the most remarkable features of Tadrat Rouge art is its realism. Animals are drawn with accurate proportions, movements are carefully observed, scenes show depth, interaction, and emotion. These artists were skilled observers. They knew their environment, they studied life closely, and they translated that knowledge into stone. As the climate slowly began to change, rainfall decreased, lakes shrank, grasslands disappeared. The Sahara started turning into the desert we know today. This process took thousands of years. It was gradual, but relentless. Water became scarce. Vegetation declined. Animals migrated away. People followed. The rock art reflects this transformation. Later images show fewer wild animals and more domesticated livestock. Eventually, camels appear, marking the arrival of true desert life and long-distance trade routes. These paintings are like a timeline, written without words, showing how humans adapted to environmental change. Rather than disappearing, they changed. They moved. Religion and spirituality also appear in the art. Some figures wear masks. Others have exaggerated features. Certain scenes seem symbolic rather than realistic. These may represent shamans, spirits, or mythological beliefs. They suggest that people here were not only concerned with survival, they were thinking about meaning, about life and death, about forces beyond nature. Ritual spaces were likely created in certain shelters, where ceremonies were performed and important stories were shared. Rock art became part of this spiritual system, a way to connect generations, a way to preserve memory, a way to communicate with the unseen. Life in Tadrat Rouge would have required constant movement and cooperation. Groups had to follow water sources. They had to protect animals. They had to share food. They had to respond quickly to environmental changes. Isolation meant danger. Community meant survival. This is reflected in the art. Most scenes show groups, not individuals. Collective life mattered. Over time, as the Sahara became more hostile, permanent settlement here became impossible. People migrated toward river valleys, coastal regions, and mountain areas where water remained available. Tadrat Rouge was slowly abandoned. No buildings were left behind. No cities were built. Only art remained, protected by dry air, sheltered rock walls, and isolation. For thousands of years, these paintings stayed hidden from the outside world. Local nomadic groups knew about them, but few outsiders visited the region. It was only in the 20th century that researchers began documenting the full scale of the artwork. What they discovered changed understanding of African prehistory. This was not an empty land. It was once a cultural heartland, rich, active, creative. Today, Tadrat Rouge is recognised as one of the most important rock art regions in the world, but it remains difficult to access. Reaching it requires long desert journeys, guides, and careful planning. This isolation has helped protect it, but it also makes preservation difficult. Wind erosion, temperature changes, and human damage threaten the paintings. Once they are gone, their stories are lost forever. Standing inside one of these rock shelters today, with ancient figures surrounding you and desert silence filling the air, creates a powerful feeling. You are looking directly at thoughts from thousands of years ago, not written. Because here, in one of the harshest environments on Earth, humans left behind a record of who they were, how they lived, and how they adapted when the world around them changed. They turned rock into history. They turned survival into art. They turned memory into landscape. And even now, after thousands of years, their voices are still visible on these silent canyon walls. Yeha Temple Ruins, Ethiopia. The stone, beginning of Ethiopian civilization at Yeha, in the highlands of northern Ethiopia, where green valleys meet rocky hills and ancient villages blend into the landscape, stands a stone structure that has quietly watched over this region for nearly 3,000 years. Surrounded by farmland, churches, and small communities, it does not immediately appear dramatic. There are no massive towers, no towering walls, no grand stairways, and yet this is one of the oldest monumental buildings in all of Africa. This is Yeha, and this place marks the beginning of Ethiopian civilization. When you first approach the great temple of Yeha, what stands out is the precision of its construction. Massive stone blocks are stacked together so tightly that no mortar was needed to hold them in place. Even today, after centuries of weather, earthquakes, and human activity, the walls remain strong and aligned. Each stone fits perfectly, each joint is exact, each surface is carefully shaped. This level of craftsmanship is rare, even by modern standards. The temple was built around the 7th century BCE, during a period when this region was connected to powerful kingdoms across the Red Sea in southern Arabia. At that time, the Sabaean civilization, based in present-day Yemen, controlled major trade routes linking Africa, Arabia, and the Mediterranean. Yeha was part of this world. It was not isolated. It was connected. Through trade, through culture, through belief, merchants carried incense, spices, metals, and luxury goods across the sea. With them came ideas, writing systems, architectural styles, and religious traditions. These influences shaped early societies in Ethiopia and laid the foundations for future kingdoms. The great temple of Yeha was dedicated to Almaka, a moon god worshipped by the Sabaeans. This shows that religion played a central role in political and social life here. Temples were not only places of worship, they were symbols of authority. They showed who ruled and why. Inside the temple, rituals would have been performed by priests on behalf of rulers and communities. Offerings were made, ceremonies were held, festivals marked important seasons. These practices reinforced unity and stability. Faith and power worked together, supporting each other, strengthening each other. Around the temple, archaeologists have discovered remains of houses, storage buildings, workshops, and administrative spaces. This shows that Yeha was not only a religious site, it was also a political and economic centre. People lived here, worked here, traded here, governed here. Farmers cultivated nearby fields. Craftsmen shaped stone and metal. Traders exchanged goods. Officials managed resources. Religious leaders guided ceremonies. This was a functioning settlement, not a remote shrine, a living community. One of the most important features of Yeha is how it connects Africa to the wider ancient world. Inscriptions found at the site are written in South Arabian script. Architectural techniques match those used in Yemen. Decorative styles reflect Arabian traditions, but Yeha was not a copy. Local builders adapted foreign ideas to African landscapes, materials, and customs. Over time, this blend created a unique cultural identity that later developed into the Aksumite civilization, one of Africa's greatest ancient empires. In this way, Yeha is a starting point, a foundation, a beginning. For centuries, Yeha remained important as political power shifted and new centres rose elsewhere. Even when the original religion faded, the site retained spiritual meaning. Later, Christian communities built churches nearby, respecting the sacred nature of the location. Old beliefs were replaced, but sacred space remained. This continuity is rare. It shows deep cultural memory. Life in ancient Yeha required discipline and cooperation. Rainfall was seasonal. Farming depended on timing. Trade depended on stability. Construction required organised labour. Nothing here happened by accident. Everything was planned. Everything was shared. Over time, as new kingdoms emerged and trade routes changed, Yeha lost its central role. Power moved to other cities, population shifted, large-scale construction stopped, but the temple remained. It did not collapse. It did not disappear. It endured for thousands of years, protected by quality, preserved by respect, rediscovered by archaeology. Modern research has revealed how advanced early Ethiopian societies were. They were literate, they were organised, they were connected to international networks, they were capable of monumental architecture. They were builders of civilization, not followers, not imitators, creators. Standing at Yeha today, surrounded by fields and quiet villages, it is difficult to imagine the activity that once filled this place. Priests walking through courtyards, merchants arriving, with caravans, leaders holding ceremonies, workers shaping stone. But the stones remember, they carry that history, they hold that story. Yeha does not impress with size or decoration. Its power lies in precision, continuity, and meaning. It represents the moment when organised society took root in the Ethiopian highlands. Because here, people learned how to combine trade, belief, engineering, and leadership into a lasting system. They turned stone into identity. They turned connection into culture. They turned cooperation into civilization. And even after 3,000 years, that beginning is still standing. Tepe Sialk Mound, Iran, where villages became civilization at Tepe Sialk. In the wide plains of central Iran, near the modern city of Kashan, rise two gentle hills that barely stand out from the surrounding land. They are not dramatic. They are not tall. They do not look like monuments. To most people, they appear like natural rises in the earth, shaped by wind and time. But these hills are not natural. They were built by people. Slowly, layer by layer, across thousands of years. This is Tepe Sialk, and it is one of the oldest places where humans learned how to live together in organised communities. Long before kings, empires, and written laws, Small groups of people settled here near water sources and fertile soil. They built simple shelters from mud and reeds. They planted crops. They kept animals. They learned how to survive in a land where seasons could be harsh and resources were limited. At first, life was basic. Families worked together, food was shared, tools were simple. But something important was happening. People were staying. They were no longer moving constantly. They were building roots. Over generations, these early settlements grew. Houses became stronger. Walls were reinforced with mud brick. Storage rooms were added to protect food. Pottery appeared, first plain, then decorated with patterns and symbols. These designs were not just decoration. They were identity. They showed belonging. They showed tradition. They showed memory. As life became more stable, society became more complex. Some people focused on farming. Others became craftsmen. Some shaped clay. Others worked with stone or metal. Trade began to develop with nearby regions. Tepe was no longer just a village. It was becoming a centre. One of the most remarkable moments in Sialk's history came when builders began constructing large ceremonial structures on the southern mound. Using thousands of mud bricks, they raised stepped platforms that may have served religious or communal purposes. These were not small projects. They required planning, leadership, cooperation, shared vision. People had to agree, to work, to wait, to build for the future. This tells us something important. By this time, society here was organised. Authority existed. Rules existed. Traditions were strong. Religion and belief played a major role in this development. Archaeological evidence suggests that certain spaces were considered sacred. Rituals were likely performed. Offerings may have been made. Seasonal ceremonies probably marked planting and harvest. Belief helped unite people. It gave meaning to effort. It created stability. Around the mounds, daily life continued. Families cooked in shared spaces. Children learned skills from elders. Craftsmen passed techniques to apprentices. Farmers managed irrigation and soil. Life was not easy. Droughts happened. Crops failed. Animals died. But communities adapted. They learned. They improved. They survived. Over centuries, Tepe changed again and again. Some periods were prosperous. Others were difficult. New groups arrived. Old traditions faded. New customs appeared. Houses were rebuilt on top of older houses. Streets covered earlier paths. History stacked itself vertically. Each generation lived on the remains of the previous one. This is why Sialk became two large mounds. They are made of human life. Compressed, preserved, layered. One of the most important achievements here was early metalworking. Evidence shows that people experimented with copper and other metals. They built furnaces. They learned how to melt and shape materials. This was technological progress. This was innovation. This was risk-taking. Metal tools improved farming, improved construction, improved trade. They changed everything. Sialk became part of wider regional networks. Goods moved between valleys and plateaus. Ideas travelled with merchants. Artistic styles spread. New techniques arrived. This community was not isolated. It was connected, aware, active. For thousands of years, people continued to live here. But eventually, conditions changed. Water sources weakened. Trade routes shifted. New cities rose elsewhere. Political centres moved. Slowly, life at Sialk declined. Families left. Fields were abandoned. Buildings collapsed. Wind and rain covered the remains. By the end of its long history, the site was quiet, empty, forgotten, but not erased, because the earth remembered. For centuries, the mounds stood silently, holding inside them the story of humanity's early experiments with settlement, cooperation, and culture. When archaeologists finally began studying the site, They realised that Sialk contained one of the longest continuous records of human life in Iran, from simple huts to planned homes to ceremonial platforms to early industry, all in one place. Walking between the two mounds today, you are walking through time. Beneath every step lie centuries of human effort. Every uneven surface marks where someone once lived, worked, dreamed and struggled. There are no grand palaces here, no giant statues, no golden treasures, and that is exactly why Sialk matters. It shows how ordinary people created civilization, through patience, through cooperation, through learning, through adaptation. Tepe Sialk is not the story of emperors, it is the story of farmers, builders, craftsmen, families, communities, people who slowly learned how to turn land into home, work into culture, and survival into society. Because here, in these quiet hills, humanity practiced civilization long before it had a name, and that experiment shaped everything that came after. Dara Ancient City, Turkey. The fortress between empires at Dara, Anastasiopolis. On the wide plains of southeastern Turkey, near the borderlands that once separated great empires, lies a ruined city carved into rock and earth, built for one main purpose: to defend, to control, to survive. Today, the site looks quiet and exposed. Stone walls rise from dry ground. Rock-cut chambers open into empty air. Vast underground cisterns lie in shadow. Broken towers stand against the sky. There are no crowds, no noise, no movement. But in the past, this was one of the most important military cities of its time. This was Dara, and for centuries it stood on the front line of history. Dara was founded in the early 6th century during the reign of the Byzantine Emperor Anastasius. At that time, the eastern borders of the Byzantine Empire were under constant pressure from the powerful Sasanian Persian Empire. Wars were frequent, borders shifted, fortresses fell and rose again. The empire needed a shield, a stronghold, a defensive heart. So they built Dara, not as a normal city, but as a military fortress. From the beginning, everything here was designed for security. The location was chosen carefully. It lay near important routes connecting Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Syria. Whoever controlled this place could monitor movement, trade, and armies. This made Dara extremely valuable and extremely dangerous. Massive stone walls surrounded the city, reinforced with towers and gates. These walls were not decorative. They were thick, tall, and carefully engineered to resist siege weapons and attacks. Inside them, the city was organised like a military machine. Barracks, armories, storage rooms, command centres, supply depots. Everything had a function. Everything had a purpose. One of the most remarkable features of Dara is its underground water system. In a region where rainfall was limited and rivers were unreliable, water could decide the outcome of wars. A city without water could not survive a long siege, so the builders carved enormous cisterns deep into the rock. Some of them are more than 30 metres high. They look like underground cathedrals, rows of pillars, vaulted ceilings, dark pools of stored water. Rainwater was collected and channeled into these spaces, allowing the city to survive for months, even years under attack. This was not simple construction. It was strategic engineering. It was survival planning. It was foresight. The city also had an advanced drainage system that prevented flooding and erosion. Channels carried excess water away from streets and buildings. Sewage systems protected hygiene. Roads were carefully laid out to allow rapid troop movement. This was military urban planning. At its peak, Dara housed tens of thousands of people, including soldiers, officers, engineers, craftsmen, merchants and families. Although it was a fortress, it was also a living city. Markets operated. Workshops produced tools and weapons. Temples and churches held services. Homes filled with daily life. Children grew up among walls and towers. For them, war was normal, defence was routine, readiness was life. Dara soon became one of the main battle points between Byzantines and Persians. Major wars were fought here. Sieges lasted months. Armies clashed outside its walls. Spies moved through its streets. Diplomats negotiated in its halls. Control of Dara meant control of the border, so everyone wanted it. In the 6th century, fierce battles were fought here between Byzantine and Persian forces. At times, the city changed hands. At other times, it resisted overwhelming attacks through discipline and engineering. Its walls held, its water lasted, its people endured. But warfare takes a toll. Each siege damaged buildings, each occupation drained resources, each conflict weakened stability. Even when Dara survived militarily, it suffered socially and economically. Over time, new powers entered the region. Arab armies expanded in the 7th century. Islamic rule replaced Byzantine control. Dara continued to exist under new administrations, but its strategic role slowly declined. Borders shifted again. Trade routes changed. Political centres moved. The city was no longer essential. Without constant military investment, maintenance stopped. Walls cracked. Water systems failed. Buildings collapsed. Population declined. People left, one by one, generation by generation. Eventually Dara was abandoned. Silence replaced commands. Wind replaced voices. Sand replaced footsteps. For centuries, the ruins remained mostly forgotten, known only to local communities. Modern archaeology revealed the true scale of the site, showing how advanced and ambitious this frontier city had been. What researchers uncovered was not just a fortress. It was a system, a complete defensive ecosystem, designed for long-term conflict, designed for endurance, designed for empire. One of the most striking parts of Dara is its necropolis, carved into cliffs near the city. Tombs were cut directly into rock, stacked in levels, forming a city of the dead beside the city of the living. This shows how permanent people believed this place would be. They expected to live here, and die here, and be remembered here. Religion also played a role in city life. Churches were built inside the walls. Priests served military and civilian communities. Faith offered comfort in a place where danger was constant. Belief helped people endure uncertainty. It gave meaning to risk. It gave strength to fear. Life in Dara was disciplined. Soldiers trained daily. Engineers inspected walls. Workers maintained canals. Officials monitored supplies. Farmers outside the city provided food. Merchants brought goods under protection of armed guards. Everything was coordinated. Nothing was casual. This was life on the edge of empire, where mistakes meant collapse, where weakness meant invasion, where preparation meant survival. Standing in Dara today, walking through its empty corridors and shadowed cisterns, it is difficult to imagine the intensity that once filled this place. The sound of marching boots, the echo of alarms, the tension of siege, the relief of victory, all gone, yet not erased, because the stone still remembers. Dara does not impress with luxury. It does not rely on beauty. It impresses through discipline, through intelligence, through resilience. It represents how far human societies were willing to go to protect borders, control territory, and maintain power. Dolavira Stadium ruins, India, engineering, order, and survival in the Harappan world at Dolavira. In the vast white landscape of the Rann of Kutch, where salt flats stretch endlessly under open skies and heat rises from the ground in shimmering waves, lies the remains of a city that once stood among the greatest achievements of the ancient world. Today, this region looks empty, harsh, and unforgiving, with very little water, little vegetation, and long seasons of intense heat. It feels like a place where human life should struggle to exist. And yet, more than 4,000 years ago, people not only lived here, they built one of the most carefully planned cities in history. This was Dolavira, and at its heart lies a mysterious open structure often called the Stadium, surrounded by massive stone walls, reservoirs, and urban blocks that reveal an extraordinary level of organisation and intelligence. When visitors first see Dolavira from above, the layout immediately stands out. The city is not chaotic, it is not scattered, it is divided into clear zones, separated by walls and gateways, arranged according to precise measurements and geometric principles. Everything feels intentional, as if the entire settlement was designed before the first stone was ever placed. This was not accidental growth, this was planned civilization. Dolavira was part of the Indus Valley civilization, one of the earliest and most advanced urban cultures in human history. At a time when many societies still lived in small villages, the people of this civilization were building cities with drainage systems, standardized bricks, regulated streets, and complex administration. They understood structure, they understood balance, they understood long-term thinking, and Dolavira represents one of their greatest achievements. The city was built on an island-like plateau between seasonal streams in a region where rainfall was limited and unpredictable. Surviving here required deep knowledge of water management. Without water, no settlement could last. With water, everything became possible. So the builders of Dolavira focused first on reservoirs, massive reservoirs, carved into rock, lined with stone, connected by channels. These systems collected rainwater and stored it for dry seasons. Some of them are among the largest known water structures in the ancient world. They show that water was treated not as a resource to be used casually, but as something sacred and strategic. Water was life, and Dolavira protected it. Near the centre of the city lies a large open area flanked by stepped seating and surrounding structures, often described as a stadium or ceremonial ground. Its exact purpose is still debated, but its design suggests that it was meant for large gatherings, public ceremonies, rituals, or important civic events. This space was not hidden, it was central, it was visible, it was symbolic. It suggests that public life mattered here, that community gatherings, leadership displays, or shared rituals were part of how society functioned. People did not live only behind closed walls. They came together, they participated, they witnessed, they belonged. Surrounding this central area were three major sections of the city: the citadel, the middle town, and the lower town. Each zone had specific functions and social roles. The citadel likely housed administrators and elites. The middle town contained skilled workers and officials. The lower town held most of the population. This shows social organisation, not chaos, not randomness, structure, hierarchy, responsibility. Streets were wide and carefully aligned. Drainage channels carried wastewater away from homes. Wells and reservoirs were placed strategically. Storage areas protected food supplies. Gates controlled movement in and out of the city. This was urban engineering at a very high level. Life inside Dolavira was disciplined and organised. Farmers in surrounding regions supplied grain and livestock. Craftsmen produced beads, tools, seals, and ornaments. Traders exchanged goods with distant lands, including Mesopotamia and Central Asia. Administrators managed resources. Scribes recorded information using the Indus script. This was not a simple settlement. It was an economic system, a political system, a social system. One of the most remarkable discoveries at Dolavira is a large stone signboard containing symbols of the Indus script, mounted prominently near a gate. This suggests public communication, announcements, or identification of authority. It shows that writing played a visible role in public life. Information mattered, communication mattered, order mattered. Religion and belief also shaped daily life. Although few large temples have been identified, ritual objects, ceremonial spaces, and symbolic designs suggest that spiritual practices were woven into the city's structure. Belief supported stability, ritual reinforced unity, faith and governance worked together. Life in Dolavira was not easy. Droughts were common. Floods sometimes damaged reservoirs. Trade routes could weaken. Political changes could affect supply. Survival depended on cooperation and planning. When water levels dropped, everyone felt it. When reservoirs filled, everyone benefited. This shared dependence strengthened community bonds. For several centuries, Dolavira thrived. Its water systems worked. Its trade networks functioned. Its social structure held. Its population remained stable. But eventually, environmental conditions changed. Monsoon patterns shifted. Rivers weakened. Droughts became more frequent. Maintaining water systems became harder. Trade routes declined. Slowly, the balance was lost. Reservoirs dried. Fields failed. Population decreased. Families left. The city began to fade. Unlike cities destroyed by war, Dolavira seems to have declined mainly through environmental pressure and economic change. People did not abandon it suddenly. They left gradually, searching for better land and more reliable water. Over time, the city became silent. Walls crumbled. Reservoirs filled with sand. Stadium seats emptied. Memory faded. For thousands of years, Dolavira lay buried beneath desert soil, preserved by isolation and climate. When archaeologists finally uncovered it, they realized they were looking at one of the most complete examples of Indus urban planning ever found. What they saw changed understanding of ancient India. It proved that advanced engineering, social organization, and environmental adaptation existed here at an early stage. Standing at the stadium today, looking across stone terraces, empty reservoirs, and distant salt flats, it is difficult to imagine the activity that once filled this place. Crowds gathering, officials speaking, rituals being performed, water flowing, trade moving, life continuing, but the design still speaks. In its symmetry, in its balance, in its precision. Dolavira does not impress through giant statues or towering monuments. Khalat al-Bahrain, Fort Bahrain. The port that connected ancient worlds at Khalat al-Bahrain, on the northern coast of Bahrain, where calm blue waters meet flat desert land and gentle winds move in from the Gulf, stands a layered fortress rising slowly from the earth. From above, it looks like a low hill crowned with stone walls and towers, surrounded by traces of ancient streets, harbours and settlements. At first glance, it appears quiet and simple, almost modest compared to famous castles and citadels elsewhere in the world. But this place holds more than 4,000 years of human history. This is Khalat al-Bahrain, and it was once one of the most important ports and capitals in the ancient world. Long before modern cities, oil industries, and global shipping routes transformed this region, Bahrain was already a key centre of trade, culture, and communication. Its location in the Persian Gulf placed it directly between Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Iran, and Arabia. Whoever controlled this island controlled the movement of goods, ideas, and wealth across vast distances, and Khalat al-Bahrain was the heart of that system. The earliest settlements here date back to the 3rd millennium BCE, when this site served as the capital of the Dilmun civilization. In ancient texts from Mesopotamia, Dilmun is described as a prosperous land, a place of purity, wealth, and abundance, closely connected to major trading powers of the time. It was not a myth, it was real, and its centre was here. Dilmun merchants traded copper from Oman, timber from distant regions, gemstones, textiles, and agricultural products. Ships arrived from the Indus Valley, caravans moved inland, warehouses stored goods, officials managed transactions, ports handled constant movement. This was maritime civilization, long before modern shipping, long before global trade systems. Life at Khalat al-Bahrain depended on the sea. Fishermen supplied food, sailors navigated coastal waters, shipbuilders repaired vessels, harbour workers loaded cargo, merchants negotiated deals in shaded courtyards. Everything flowed through this place: water, goods, information, power. As centuries passed, different cultures took control of the site. After Dilmun, new rulers arrived, followed by Kassites, Persians, Hellenistic administrators, and later Islamic dynasties. Each group rebuilt parts of the city, added fortifications, constructed new buildings, and reshaped urban space. Instead of replacing the past, they built on top of it, layer by layer, generation after generation. This is why the site today looks like a mound rather than a single structure. Beneath the visible fort lie buried cities stacked over thousands of years. Streets lie under streets, houses rest on older houses, walls cover earlier walls. History here is vertical, not horizontal. The fortress that dominates the site today was mainly constructed during the Portuguese period in the 16th century, when European powers competed for control of Gulf trade routes. The Portuguese recognised the strategic value of Bahrain and built strong stone defences to protect their interests. Thick walls, high towers, guarded gates, wide courtyards, all designed for surveillance and defence. But this fort was only the latest chapter in a much older story. Beneath it lie the remains of palaces, temples, residential quarters, storage facilities, and harbour installations from earlier periods. Archaeological excavations have revealed carefully planned neighbourhoods, drainage systems, wells, workshops, and administrative buildings. This was not a temporary trading post, it was a permanent capital, an organised city, a political centre. Water management played a crucial role in sustaining life here. Freshwater springs, underground channels, and wells supplied residents with drinking water and irrigation. These systems allowed agriculture to develop despite the dry climate, supporting date palms, vegetables, and grain. Without water, trade would collapse. Without trade, power would vanish. So water was protected, maintained, managed. Life inside the city followed strict organisation. Elites lived near administrative areas. Merchants operated close to warehouses and harbours. Craftsmen worked in designated zones. Labourers lived in outer neighbourhoods. Roads connected key points efficiently. This was urban planning, not random growth, not informal settlement. Careful design. Religion also shaped daily life. Temples and later mosques served as spiritual centres. Rituals marked seasons, trade cycles, and political events. Belief reinforced authority and social unity. Faith supported order. Order supported stability. For centuries, Khalat al-Bahrain remained important because it adapted. When trade routes shifted, it adjusted. When new rulers arrived, it reorganised. When technologies changed, it adopted them. Adaptation was survival. However, no centre of power lasts forever. As new ports developed elsewhere and political influence moved, Bahrain's central role declined. European colonial systems weakened. Regional powers rose. Global trade patterns changed. Gradually, the city lost its importance. Harbours filled with sand. By the modern period, much of the site was abandoned, left to wind, sand, and time. Only fragments of walls and foundations remained visible, hiding the immense history beneath. Modern archaeology revealed what had been forgotten. Excavations showed that this single location contained evidence of continuous occupation for over 4,000 years, making it one of the longest used urban sites in the Gulf region. What researchers found transformed understanding of Arabian history. This region was not marginal. Standing at Qalat al-Bahrain today, looking out over the sea and across layered ruins, it is possible to imagine ships approaching the harbour, sails catching the wind, traders preparing goods, guards watching the coastline, and officials recording transactions. This was a living system, a breathing city, a maritime capital. The fort does not impress through height or decoration. Its power lies in depth, continuity, and connection. It represents how human societies learn to use geography, water, and trade to build long-lasting networks across cultures and continents. Here, people learned how to turn coastline into opportunity, exchange into prosperity, and cooperation into civilization. They did not rely on isolation, because in this quiet coastal landscape, humans built one of the earliest global trading hubs, linking distant worlds long before modern maps and machines existed. Bat tombs, Oman, memory, belief, and survival in Arabia's early world, at Bat, Al-Qutmaneh and Al-Ain. In the dry interior of northern Oman, where rugged mountains rise behind open plains and desert winds move quietly across stony ground, lies a landscape filled with hundreds of ancient stone structures that seem almost unreal when seen from above. From the air, they appear like small circles scattered across the earth, arranged carefully in clusters and lines, stretching toward distant hills. These are the Bat tombs, and they represent one of the earliest organised burial landscapes in the Arabian Peninsula. At first glance, the region feels empty and harsh. There are no large cities nearby. Vegetation is sparse, rain is limited, temperatures can be extreme. It seems like a place where long-term settlement would be difficult, if not impossible. But thousands of years ago, people built communities here. They farmed, they traded, they organised, they believed, and they left. Behind these stone monuments is proof. The Bat tombs date mainly to the Bronze Age, around the 3rd millennium BCE, during a period when societies across Arabia were becoming more complex and interconnected. This was a time when people were shifting from small, scattered groups into organised communities with leadership, economic systems, and shared traditions. Bat was part of this transformation. It was not isolated. It was connected to wider networks stretching across Mesopotamia, Iran, and the Indus region. The most striking feature of the site is the presence of hundreds of circular beehive tombs built from carefully stacked limestone blocks. Each tomb is shaped like a low stone tower, wider at the base and narrowing toward the top, creating a form that is both simple and precise. These tombs were not built quickly. They required planning, coordination, skilled labour, and shared purpose. Each structure was designed to hold multiple burials, often used by families or communities over long periods. Inside, archaeologists have found human remains along with pottery, beads, tools, and personal objects. These were not random graves. They were collective monuments. By building durable stone tombs instead of simple pits, the people of Bat were making a powerful statement. They were saying that their dead mattered, that their ancestors remained part of the community, and that identity extended beyond a single lifetime. Death was not an ending. It was a connection between generations. The location of Bat was carefully chosen. It lies near ancient water sources and fertile pockets of land where early farmers could grow crops and raise animals. Seasonal rivers and underground channels supported agriculture, making permanent settlement possible in an otherwise dry region. Water shaped everything. Settlement, trade. Around the tomb fields, archaeologists have uncovered remains of houses, towers, storage areas and defensive structures. showing that Bat was not only a cemetery, it was a living settlement with economic and social importance. People worked here, lived here, raised families here, farmers cultivated fields, herders managed livestock, craftsmen shaped pottery and tools, traders moved goods across desert routes, leaders coordinated labour and security. This was organised life, not temporary survival. Trade played a major role in Bat's development. During the Bronze Age, Oman was a key source of copper, which was highly valued by neighbouring civilizations. Copper from this region was exported to Mesopotamia and beyond, helping fuel early urban economies. Bat was part of this system. Copper moved out, goods moved in, wealth circulated, influence expanded. This trade brought prosperity and stability, allowing communities to invest in large-scale construction projects like tombs and towers. It also strengthened social hierarchy, as some families gained more power and resources than others. Burial practices reflect this structure. Some tombs contain richer grave goods, suggesting differences in status. Others are simpler, showing that society was organised but not equal. Hierarchy existed. Leadership mattered. Authority was recognised. Religion and belief were deeply connected to burial traditions. Although we do not know the exact rituals performed, the careful placement of bodies and objects suggests belief in an afterlife or spiritual continuation. Ancestors were honoured, they were remembered, they were respected. Rituals likely accompanied burials, involving gatherings, offerings, and ceremonies that reinforced community bonds. These events were moments when people came together, shared stories, and reaffirmed identity. In difficult environments, unity is survival. Shared belief strengthens cooperation. Shared memory builds resilience. Life in Bronze Age Bat was demanding. Droughts could damage crops, floods could destroy channels, trade routes could be disrupted, conflicts could arise over resources. Survival required discipline, maintenance, planning, mutual support. For several centuries this system worked. Bat and nearby settlements flourished, population increased, trade expanded, culture developed, social institutions stabilised, but environmental and economic conditions eventually changed. Climate patterns shifted, water sources weakened, trade routes declined, new political centres rose elsewhere. Gradually, Bat lost its importance. People migrated, fields were abandoned, houses collapsed, only tombs remained. The stone structures endured long after daily life disappeared, standing as silent witnesses to a vanished society. For thousands of years, these remains lay undisturbed in the desert, known mainly to local communities. Modern archaeology revealed their true age and significance, showing that this region was once a major centre of early Arabian civilization. What researchers uncovered changed understanding of Oman's past. It showed that complex societies existed here long before later empires, that people organised themselves effectively, that they built lasting traditions. Today, the Bat tombs are protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognised for their exceptional value in telling the story of early human settlement in Arabia. Conservation efforts focus on preserving fragile stone structures against erosion, development, and time. Standing among these tombs today, with mountains rising in the distance and desert silence surrounding you, creates a powerful sense of continuity. You are walking through a landscape shaped by thousands of lives, decisions, hopes, and beliefs. Every stone was placed by human hands, every circle marks a family, every cluster represents a community. Bat does not impress through massive walls or towering palaces. Its importance lies in memory, organisation, and collective effort. It shows how early societies learned to transform. Naqshi Rostam tombs, Iran, where kings carved their memory into stone at Naqshi Rostam, in the wide valley of southern Iran, not far from the ruins of Persepolis, a towering limestone cliff rises from the plain, like a natural wall separating earth from sky. From a distance, it looks empty and silent, shaped only by wind, time, and sunlight. But as you move closer, something remarkable appears. High above the ground, carved directly into the rock face, are enormous tombs and reliefs, perfectly aligned, carefully shaped, impossible to ignore. This is Naqshi Rostam, and it is one of the most powerful statements of royal authority ever carved into stone. When visitors first arrive here, the scale is overwhelming. 4 massive cross-shaped tombs are cut deep into the cliff, each one placed dozens of meters above the ground. Below them, carved scenes show kings standing before gods, armies marching, and enemies being defeated. This is not decoration, this is declaration. This is power made permanent. More than 2,500 years ago, this place was chosen by the rulers of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, one of the greatest empires in ancient history, as their royal burial ground. These kings ruled territories stretching from Egypt to Central Asia, from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean Sea. They controlled millions of people, hundreds of cities, thousands of routes, and they wanted to be remembered, not in hidden graves, not in forgotten hills, but in the face of mountains. The tombs at Naqshi Rostam belong to some of Persia's greatest rulers, including Darius the Great and his successors. Each tomb follows the same basic design, carved in the shape of a giant cross. At the centre is a doorway leading to the burial chamber. Above it is a relief showing the king standing on a platform, supported by representatives of the empire's many nations, while facing a sacred symbol associated with divine authority. This design was not accidental. It was political. It was symbolic. It was carefully planned. The king is shown as the centre of the world, supported by many peoples, approved by the gods, protected by eternity. These tombs were meant to send a message to everyone who passed through this valley. This empire is strong. This rule is legitimate. This power is eternal. Building these tombs was an extraordinary engineering achievement. Workers had to carve deep into solid rock, high above the ground, using simple tools made of metal and stone. They had to measure distances precisely, align structures perfectly, and remove enormous amounts of material without causing collapse. This required planning, skill, coordination, experience. It also required authority, because such projects demanded large labour forces and long periods of work. Only a powerful state could organise construction on this scale. Naqshi Rostam was not only about death, it was about control, even in the afterlife. The kings wanted to remain visible, dominant, unreachable, above ordinary people. Inside the tombs, burial chambers were simple compared to the grandeur outside. Bodies were placed in stone coffins, along with limited grave goods. This reflects Persian beliefs that focused more on legacy and order than on lavish burial wealth. The true monument was the cliff itself, not what lay inside. Below the Achaemenid tombs, later rulers of the Sasanian Empire, who ruled Persia centuries later, added their own carvings to the site. These reliefs show dramatic scenes of kings receiving divine approval, defeating Roman emperors, and celebrating victories. By carving their images beneath the older tombs, the Sasanians were making a statement. They were linking themselves to the past, claiming inheritance, continuing tradition. They were saying, "We are the new guardians of this land." In this way, Naqshi Rostam became a layered monument, representing multiple empires across the different eras, each using the same landscape to express power. Near the tombs stands a mysterious stone tower known as the Kaaba of Zoroaster. Its exact purpose is still debated, but it was likely used for religious or ceremonial functions. Its presence shows that this site was not only about burial, but also about ritual, belief, and state ideology. Religion played a central role in Persian kingship. Rulers were seen as chosen protectors of cosmic order. They were responsible for maintaining justice, stability, and harmony between humans and divine forces. The carvings reflect this belief. The king is never alone. He is always connected to higher power, to law, to order, to destiny. Life in the Achaemenid Empire was built on administration, roads, taxation, communication, and tolerance of different cultures. From capitals like Persepolis and Susa, officials managed vast territories using standardized systems and local cooperation. Naqsh-i-Rostam reflects this organized worldview. Everything here is measured, balanced, intentional. Even death was planned. Even memory was managed. Over time, the empire fell. Alexander's armies passed through. New dynasties rose. Borders changed. Languages shifted. Religions evolved. But the cliff remained. The tombs stayed. The carvings endured. Unlike palaces and cities that collapsed, these monuments survived because they were part of the mountain itself. Wind could not destroy them easily. Fire could not reach them. Floods could not wash them away. Stone became memory. For centuries, travellers passed by this place without fully understanding its meaning. Some believed it was connected to legendary heroes. Others associated it with myths. Only later did scholars begin to decode its true historical importance. Modern research revealed that this was not just a cemetery. It was a political stage, a religious statement, a message to the future. Standing at Naqsh-i-Rostam today, looking up at tombs, carved high into the cliff, creates a powerful feeling. You are standing where kings once planned their eternity. You are looking at how rulers tried to defeat time itself. They did not trust paper. They did not trust stories. They trusted stone. They trusted mountains. They trusted permanence. The site does not impress through colour or decoration. Its power lies in scale, position, and intention. It shows how human ambition can reshape landscapes to serve memory and authority. Here, rulers learned how to turn nature into monument, geography into propaganda, and death into legacy. They carved their names into the earth. They placed their bodies in the sky. They turned cliffs into history. And even after more than 2,000 years, their message is still visible, written in shadow and stone across this silent valley. Sirkap, Taxila Ruins, Pakistan, where Greek, Indian and Central Asian worlds met at Sirkap, in the broad valleys of northern Pakistan, where green fields meet distant hills and ancient trade routes once crossed between South Asia and Central Asia, lie the quiet remains of a city that was built to connect worlds. From above, the site appears carefully ordered, with straight streets, rectangular blocks, and clear boundaries, standing out from the surrounding landscape like a geometric pattern carved into the earth. This is Sirkap, and it was one of the most important crossroad cities of the ancient world. Today, the ruins look calm and exposed. Low stone walls outline houses and temples. Broken columns lie beside empty streets. Dust moves slowly across foundations that once supported busy neighbourhoods. There is little sound, little movement, and little sign of the thousands of people who once lived here. But 2,000 years ago, this place was alive with languages, religions, and cultures from across Asia. Sirkap was founded around the 2nd century BCE, during the period when Greek rulers controlled parts of northwestern India after the campaigns of Alexander the Great. These Indo-Greek kings brought with them ideas from the Mediterranean world, including new forms of architecture, city planning, art, and administration. Instead of destroying local traditions, they combined them. They blended cultures. They created something new, and Sirkap was the result. The city was built as part of the wider region known as Gandhara, an area famous for its role in trade, learning, and religious exchange. Caravans travelled through here carrying silk, spices, metals, gemstones, and textiles between India, Central Asia, China, and the Middle East. Sirkap stood directly on these routes. Whoever controlled it controlled movement, and movement meant power. From the beginning, Sirkap was designed with precision. Its streets followed a grid pattern similar to cities in Greece and Central Asia. Main roads ran straight from gate to gate, intersected by smaller lanes that divided neighbourhoods into organised blocks. This was not organic growth. This was planned urban design. Houses, shops, workshops, and religious buildings were arranged systematically. Drainage channels carried waste away. Storage spaces protected goods. Gates controlled entry and exit. Order was built into the ground. One of the most remarkable features of Sirkap is the diversity of its buildings. Within a relatively small area, archaeologists have found Hindu temples, Buddhist stupas, Greek-style shrines, and Central Asian structures. This tells us something important. People of different beliefs lived side by side. They worshipped differently, they spoke differently, they dressed differently, yet they shared the same city. This was multicultural life in the ancient world, long before modern ideas of globalization. One famous structure at Sirkap is the so-called double-headed eagle stupa, which combines Greek decorative elements with Buddhist symbolism. Other temples show Indian designs mixed with foreign influences. Homes reflect both local and imported styles. Architecture became conversation. Stone became dialogue. Culture became fusion. Life in Sirkap revolved around trade and learning. Merchants operated shops along main streets. Craftsmen produced metalwork, pottery, and ornaments. Scholars discussed philosophy and religion. Monks taught students. Travellers exchanged news from distant lands. This was a city of exchange, not only of goods, but of ideas. Buddhism flourished strongly in this region, and Sirkap became part of a network of monasteries and learning centres that spread Buddhist teachings along trade routes towards Central Asia and China. At the same time, Hindu traditions continued, and remnants of Greek religious practices remained visible. Religion here was layered, not replaced, added to, expanded. Political control over Sirkap changed many times. After the Indo-Greeks, the city came under the rule of the Scythians, then the Parthians, and later the Kushan Empire. Each new power maintained the city, repaired walls, supported trade, and allowed cultural diversity to continue. This continuity is rare. It shows stability. It shows adaptability. It shows respect for systems that worked. Under the Kushans, Sirkap reached new heights. Trade expanded further. Buddhist art developed into the famous Gandharan style, blending Indian themes with Greek realism. Sculptors created statues that would influence Asian art for centuries. The city became part of a spiritual highway. Ideas travelled from India to China, from Persia to the Himalayas, and Sirkap was one of the stations. Water management also played a crucial role. Wells, channels, and storage systems supplied residents with drinking water and irrigation. Without these systems, urban life here would have been impossible. Again, survival depended on planning, on maintenance, on cooperation. Life in Sirkap was active and demanding. Merchants negotiated prices. Caravans arrived and departed. Monks led prayers. Teachers instructed students. Officials collected taxes. Guards watched gates. Farmers supplied food from surrounding lands. This was not a sleepy town. It was a working hub, a living system. But no trade city is permanent. Over time, political instability, changes in trade routes, and environmental pressures weakened Sirkap's position. New cities rose, roads shifted, economic centres moved elsewhere. Gradually, the flow slowed. Markets emptied, workshops closed, families migrated, maintenance stopped, the city began to decay. By the early centuries CE, much of Sirkap had been abandoned. Buildings collapsed, streets filled with dust, walls crumbled, nature reclaimed space. For centuries, the ruins lay quietly in the valley, known mainly to local communities. Modern archaeology revealed their importance, showing that this was one of the clearest examples of cultural fusion in ancient South Asia. What researchers found changed understanding of the region. This was not a remote frontier. It was a global meeting point. Standing in Sirkap today, walking along straight streets and between empty foundations, it is possible to imagine the voices that once filled this space. Greek merchants calling prices, Indian priests chanting prayers, Central Asian travellers resting with caravans, students debating philosophy, different accents, different beliefs. One city. Sirkap does not impress through massive walls or towering monuments. Its power lies in its structure, diversity, and openness. It represents how human societies learn to live together, trade together, and learn from each other across cultural boundaries. Here, people discovered that strength does not come only from armies and borders. It comes from connection, from exchange, from cooperation, from curiosity. They turned crossroads into community. They turned diversity into culture. They turned movement into civilization. And even today, after 2,000 years, that lesson is still written in the silent streets of this ancient city.